Chapter 10, Introduction to the Human Body, Part 3. More on tissues. Groups of connected cells form tissues. The cells in a tissue may be all the same type or they may be of multiple types. In either case, the cells in the tissue work together to carry out a specific function. There are four main types of human tissues: connective, epithelial, muscle, and nervous. Connective tissues. The most diverse and abundant of all tissues, connective tissue holds cells together and supports the body. Connective tissue is made up of cells suspended in a non-cellular matrix. The matrix, also known as ground substance, is secreted by the connective tissue cells and determines the characteristics of the connective tissue. The consistency of the matrix determines the function of the connective tissue. The matrix can be liquid, gel-like, or solid. For example, the extracellular matrix of bone is rigid. The extracellular matrix of blood is liquid. Connective tissues such as bone and cartilage generally form the body's structure. Connective tissue fibers. Fibroblast cells are responsible for synthesizing protein fibers for the matrix. And again, these cells are going to be making this material through its organelles. Think about the organelle that produces protein. That would be the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So it would have something to do with that, maybe going through the Golgi. Collagen fibers are strong, elastic fibers are flexible, and reticular fibers form a supportive framework for organs and basement membranes. The basement membrane is this layer below the epithelial layer in many cases. Here's a flow chart of the different kinds of connective tissue. So we have very many subcategories. We have connective tissue proper that could be loose or dense, and then its varieties of each. And then other types of connective tissue: cartilage, bone, and blood. And you'll see that cartilage has three main categories. Connective tissue proper. There are two subcategories of connective tissue proper. One is loose connective tissue. This thin and soft tissue contains many collagen and elastic fibers in a gel-like matrix. The cells in loose connective tissue are not close together. This tissue functions in binding the skin to underlying structures. There are three types of loose connective tissue. Areolar connective tissue is a common form of loose connective tissue. It is found in the skin and mucous membranes where it binds the skin or membranes to underlying tissues such as muscles. It is also found around blood vessels and internal organs where it links and supports them. I like to call this packing material. Maybe I'll just write that in there, packing material. Then there's adipose connective tissue, which is commonly known as fat. This tissue contains fat cells that are specialized for lipid storage. In addition to storing energy, this tissue also cushions and protects the organs. Reticular connective tissue is mostly composed of reticular protein fibers, which make a skeleton, also known as stroma, for the lymphatic and white blood cells. This type of tissue is found in the spleen and other lymphatic structures such as the tonsils. So reticular is a kind of a web-like formation. Examples of loose connective tissue. Here's just adipose and reticular. Connective tissue proper has another category, dense connective tissue. This includes three subgroups. And these tissues differ on the arrangement and composition of the fibrous elements of the extracellular matrix. Dense regular connective tissue has extracellular fibers that all run in the same direction and plane. Muscle tendons are a type of dense regular connective tissue. Dense irregular connective tissue contains collagen and elastic fibers, which are found running in all different directions and planes. The dermis of the skin is composed of dense, irregular connective tissue. Now, the dermis is the layer below the epidermis, and This is the area that it would have capillaries in it. So if you cut yourself and you do not bleed, you cut a finger and you don't bleed, you're only cutting into the epidermis, the outer layer of the skin organ. But if you cut in deeper, sometimes you'll get some blood. That means that you've cut into the dermis layer. Elastic connective tissue is composed of freely branching elastic fibers with fibroblasts in the spaces between the fibers. This tissue allows the kind of stretch that is found in the walls of arteries. Examples of dense connective tissue. We have regular and irregular. You can see the difference in the structures there. And here's another flow chart of how that all fits together. So we were looking at loose, which includes areolar, adipose, and reticular, and then we had dense, which includes regular, irregular, and elastic. Then we have cartilage, which is another category of its own from the main category, connective tissue, is a relatively solid and non-vascularized tissue. In other words, it does not have a blood supply. The matrix is produced by cells called chondroblasts, which when mature are called chondrocytes and reside in small places called lacunae. So there you've got like a bunch of new terms to look at. You might know that if there's a cartilage injury of some sort, it takes a long time to heal. And it's because there's no blood supply there. So any nutrients or wastes from that cellular area need to be transported through diffusion, which is not so quick as a capillary blood supply would be. There are 3 types of cartilage. Hyaline is the most common type. It contains collagen fibers and is found in many places, including the nose, between the ribs and the sternum, and in the rings of the trachea. You can feel it in your trachea. That's the easiest place to feel it. Elastic cartilage has elastic fibers in the matrix and supports the shape of the ears and forms part of the larynx, which is the part of your respiratory system that is involved in speaking. Fibrocartilage is tough and contains collagen fibers and is responsible for cushioning the knee joint and for forming the discs between the vertebrae. Bone. Bone is a hard, mineralized connective tissue found in the skeleton. The bone matrix contains many collagen fibers as well as inorganic salts, calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate, all features that make it a very rigid structure. Bone cells called osteoblasts secrete the osteoid substance that eventually hardens around the cells to form an ossified matrix. The osteon forms the basic unit of compact bone. And this is, of course, related to the slide we had just with the separate types of bone cells, but now we're putting them together into a tissue. Osteocytes are located within the lacunae inside of osteons. Because the bone matrix is very dense and diffusion is rare, these osteocytes need to get their nutrition from the central canal via tiny canals, so to speak, called caniculae. So we can see the dark areas in the left-hand photo here are the central canals, and then radiating from those central canals are little caniculae, which are tiny canals that are communicating with the osteocytes inside the osteon. Pretty complex. Blood. Blood is a fluid connective tissue because the matrix of blood, called plasma, is not solid. Other components of blood are the foreign elements: white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. Okay, and those white blood cells, as you heard before, are neutrophils, monocytes, lymphocytes, eosinophils, and basophils.